Rockies. More and more Rockies on the Hall of Fame ballot. What are the odds? What are the chances? What does it mean to see so many Rockies on the ballot?
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the second day of December in the year 2022. I am your host of the Colorado Rockies podcast that is known as the Locked On Rockies podcast, where we talk about the Colorado Rockies each and every single day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and streaming on your favorite streaming service. All you got to do, search Locked On Rockies, and that's where you'll find us. You can also join us live on YouTube more often than not, because we'll talk about sometimes when we're not live later in the show. But before we do that, I got to tell you about some folks that help make this show possible. That includes BetOnline, because today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Today on the Locked On Rockies podcast, we are going to be talking Hall of Fame. Purple Row has a nice little write-up of more and more players that are on the ballot or soon to be on the ballot that are Colorado Rockies legends, honestly. We talk about what that means and their chances of getting in. And, of course, we talk all things Rockies each and every day, because that's what I do. That's who I am. Because if you're asking, who is this guy? I'm your Rockies fan extraordinaire, Paul Holden, and we've been bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies podcast for about 2 seasons now here on the Locked On Podcast Network, and I've been following this team my entire life. So let's dive in here. Let's jump over to Purple Row here. Joel Milholm writes, last week I wrote about the milestone of a Rockies pitcher, Huston Street, earning a place on the Baseball Writers Association of America Hall of Fame ballot, which we'll also probably take a little bit of a look at. But with Todd Helton trending in the right direction to become the second Rocky in Cooperstown, there are several Rockies who will be appearing on the ballot over the next few years. While the biggest splash is on the 2023 Contemporary Era ballot, which is voted on by the Contemporary Baseball Era Players Committee, unlike the BBWAA Hall of Fame ballot, are stars from the steroid era like Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, and Curt Schilling. And there's one former Rocky in the list, Dale Murphy. Despite being past his prime, Murphy was signed by the Rockies 2 days before opening day in the inaugural season of 1993. The 37-year-old seven-time All-Star, who was the back-to-back NL MVP in 82 and 83, only played 26 games for the Rockies, getting 49 plate appearances. He recorded 6 hits, 1 double, drove in 7 runs, and scored 1 run. The 18-year MLB veteran was one of the best players in the 80s, and when the Rockies signed him, it was a big deal. Murphy, who played 15 years with Atlanta, wasn't a Rocky for long, but his total of 398 homers and career RWAR of 46.5 are impressive. All right, now going over to the BBW, the Baseball Writers ballots. I like how she introduced it. Mr. He definitely touched home plate himself, will become Hall of Fame eligible. Matt Holliday. This is crazy. This is the biggest deal here, too. And we'll get into the numbers because I'll spoil it. In 2025, Tulo is going to be on the bracket or on the ballot. And that's just crazy to think that Tulo and Matt Holliday are already on the Hall of Fame ballot. It is a real sign. It's a true sign that I am getting slowly but surely older. Plenty of life to live, plenty of youth left, obviously. But it is one of those reminders. I finally am starting to see the generation of ball players that I grew up playing with or seeing play are now entering the Hall of Fame. It's basically I'm seeing in sports for the first time. It's kind of one of these first big eras of sports legend turnover, right? I mean, we've kind of seen the passing of the torch in a lot of areas, the Rockies especially. If you haven't been paying attention to the Rockies and following the Rockies and you went to a game this year, Charlie Blackmon was probably the only one you recognized outside of maybe a pitcher or two of those of even that far back. I mean, even with the playoff teams, that might have gotten enough interest. But if you're not following the Rockies enough, you might still think of the Troy Tulowitzki, Matt Holliday, Carlos Gonzalez era of the Rockies. And it's not that, I mean, Gonzalez was with the Rockies not too long ago. I mean, it's a few years now, but anyway, I was just so blown away when I was seeing this article. I was like, already? It's here now. But let's take a look here about. Let's go back to what Joel writes here. On Purple Row, Holliday and Tulo coming to Hall of Fame ballot in the next 2 years on purplerow.com. Even though Holliday spent 7.5 years with the Cardinals and only 5 with the Rockies, his run in Colorado was special. He earned all-star bids in 2006, 2007, and 2008, and was a key player in the Rocktober World Series run. He had 130 of his 316 homers and drove in 486 of his 1,220 runs in purple. In 2007, when he finished second behind Jimmy Rollins in NL MVP voting, rolling my eyes, should have been the MVP. We all know that. Career highs and led the NL in hits, doubles, RBI, and batting average. How do you lead the NL in hits, doubles, RBI, and batting average, and you're not the MVP? And you take your team, who swept that Phillies team, mind you. Was that this year? Yeah, because wasn't it wasn't it a Phillies and then Diamondbacks? If I'm remembering correctly, that's what the Rocktober run to get to the World Series was. Diamondbacks was the championship series. Yeah, the Phillies were in that one. I'm pretty positive. Anyway, Matt Holliday should have won MVP that year. He did touch home plate. Finished his career with a RWAR, baseball reference WAR, of 44.5, and helped the Cardinals win the World Series in 2011, while the former outfielder is beloved in Colorado, where he has the 8th best WAR in team history at 18.6. He's probably more cherished in St. Louis, and he's probably going to be someone that if he does good in, which I think he has a very strong case to do so. When you're beloved in St. Louis, I think that's going to give you a little bit of a bump there as well. He's going to go in as a Cardinal. But for us, we get to hold on to the fact that Matt Holliday was awesome with the Colorado Rockies. So will he get in? I mean, it really truly depends. I think you look at those numbers when you're basically an MVP, when you've been in as many big moments and you've been at the biggest stage as many times as Matt Holliday has been, and he did it with 2 teams. I think the proof is in the pudding there. I mean, there's probably maybe more so, but when you look at the overall ballot, sometimes Holliday is going to be one of the more appealing names on the list, I think. Let's talk about another Rockies legend, and let's talk about one that's on the ballot currently this year for the Hall of Fame, but and it's not the one you're thinking of. But before we do that, got to tell you about some of our sponsors. That includes BetOnline. BetOnline's got you covered for all your sports betting needs. They got your information. They got your stats. They got your news. They got your analysis. It's up to the minute, folks. If you need to know the latest on a line, a trend, or some action going on in the world of sports betting, betonline.net is the place for you. Like I said, #1 spot for the odds, the trends, and they got the action for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. They got it all at betonline.net. Even got sports podcasts there. I know you like podcasts because you're listening to them here. You can find those at BetOnline. They are the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. You can head to the website. That's betonline.net today, or use your mobile device to learn more about BetOnline. betonline.net, where the game starts. We're talking Hall of Fame today on the Locked On Rockies podcast. Not so much about Todd Helton, but some of the faces coming to the ballot soon. But there's one face that's on the ballot this year, and I think the journey might be kind of tough. But for the former Rookie of the Year, Huston Street, he only had a brief time in Colorado, but he was good and was in that, came over right after the 07 appearance, was part of the Rockies playoff appearance, and even got an MVP vote that year. Huston Street's overall career, 14.5 baseball reference WAR, 42 wins, 34 losses, a 2.95 ERA, and over 600. He got 680 innings, 324 saves, and a whip of 1.066. and 665 strikeouts. Man, oh man, that's just such a solid line and really consistent too. Handled the challenge of Coors Field pretty well. When you look at his career ERA numbers, his numbers were the highest outside of 2008 in Oakland. He was pretty much sitting high. He had another one there in 2006 as well. So kind of some career averages in terms of ERA with the Rockies. He was an all-star after he left the Rockies and went over to the Padres in 2012 with a 1.85 ERA that year and 39 innings pitched with 46 strikeouts, but some really solid years for the Rockies and 47 innings pitched for the Rockies in 2010. 45 strikeouts to 11 walks, only gave up 5 home runs, but the home run bug bit him in that final year, doubling it to 10 home runs, but he saw 11 more innings pitched. The Rockies definitely used Huston Street. He definitely got a lot of action with the Colorado Rockies. Just don't think he definitely won't go. If he does go in, he's not going to go in as a member of the Rockies. It'll probably go in as maybe Oakland or maybe even his time as a Padre where he was an all-star there as well. It's an interesting question to be, but Huston Street, really solid reliever. And again, someone that I think his case does get bolstered by when you look at the fact that he handled being a relief pitcher out of the bullpen at Coors Field, something that not everyone can say. And it's definitely it's definitely easier said than done. So we'll see what happens with Huston Street. I would imagine that might be a little bit of an uphill climb, but really, really solid career for Houston there. And his best seasons, when you're looking at it, were his second best season was 2009 with the Rockies in terms of overall performance. So one of his best years, even outside of his being an all-star, he was that was most successful with the Rockies. So that's going to be their second time he was the most successful in his season in terms of wins above replacement. He was with the Rockies, so maybe that's going to help bolster his chances as well. Let's go back to Purple Row here. Holliday and Tulo coming to the Hall of Fame ballot in the next 2 years. Looking ahead to 2025, the greatest shortstop in Rockies history, Troy Tulowitzki, will be eligible to be on the ballot. He spent 9.5 of his 13 MLB seasons in Colorado, but will have a hard time earning votes because of his injury issues. The 5-time All-Star only played in over 100 games 8 times in his career, but he finished 5th in NL MVP voting in 2010 and 2011, years when he also won Gold Gloves and was absolutely magical in the field. He has the 4th best RWAR in team history at 39.5, behind only Todd Helton, Larry Walker, and Nolan Arenado. Playing his first full season in 2007 when he finished second in the NL Rookie of the Year voting, again, another time when the Rockies were snubbed, Tulo got a taste for winning during October and served as the team's leader after Helton retired in 2013. If he could have stayed healthy, it's hard to imagine what could have been. It will also be a crowded ballot with Ichiro Suzuki and CC Sabathia could be first balloters, and Felix Hernandez could be a big vote getter. Come 2026, the Rockies could see another former player on the ballot in Matt Kemp. I forgot Matt Kemp played with the Rockies. That's right. While he'll be remembered more for his 10-year Dodger career, even his brief stops in San Diego and Atlanta than his time in Colorado, he was still a valuable veteran to have in Colorado during the challenges of COVID-19 shortened 2020. So that was kind of it in terms of that. Tulo's case is tough. Every part of me says yes, because Tulo is such a special player. Tulo was such a dominant force on the field when he was healthy, but that injury bug was so bad. It just got in the way of everything. And I mean, it ultimately got in the way of his ultimate dream of playing for the Yankees too. But I mean, when Tulo was on the field and contributing for the Colorado Rockies, magical, like in the piece there, is really the best way to describe it. He really was magical out there. He was someone that just played the tenacity, the energy, wanted to win, and brought a fire to Rockies teams that weren't always competitive, and he was ready to fill that gap. The Rockies had one of the, a huge identity to fill in terms of the face of your franchise with Todd Helton retiring. Tulo was there. Tulo was the perfect person to fill in and to take over there. And, it might not be recognized on the national stage, but there's without a doubt, Rockies fans think that Troy Tulowitzki is a Hall of Famer. And, and that's okay. That might be the benchmark. That might be where kind of the line is, of recognizing Rocky's greatness of Tulo. I wouldn't hate to see two retired personally in Rockies lore. But that might be the ceiling. I think great Rockies recognition might be, unfortunately, on the big scale of recognition where Tulo's career is going to top out. But who knows? I mean, there might be a lot of people that see Tulo and saw what he did and know what he did do when he was on the field. But there is a lot of people that value how much you're on, being on the field matters. And Tulo had a hard time of doing that. But boy, oh boy, when he was on the field, was it something else? We'll talk a little bit more about the kind of idea of how important it is. And now the fact of the Rockies have a legacy, and it's kind of time to start embracing that. We'll do that here in just a sec. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast, where you can find your Rockies talk each and every day. Want to give you a brief heads up about next week. I'm actually technically on vacation, but we do have some great crossovers. It's a crossover week next week. We will not be live on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, but doesn't mean you shouldn't go and subscribe to know when we go live next. I'll be back in action with the pod, so don't miss out there. So you can find all the video podcasts on Locked On Rockies, and you can join us live when we record the show. But to kind of put a bow on our Hall of Fame conversation, it's really cool to see the Rockies have history building. And it's kind of cool to see this. What's nice about being a fan of a younger team in terms of overall scale, like the Rockies is, I kind of have seen, or at least have some sort of connection to almost each and every piece of Rockies history, which is really cool to me because the Rockies history is starting to grow and grow and grow. And I think it's time the team starts to consider, with them continuing to build up around the area, their focus on the ballpark. I think it's time to start recognizing your own players. As much as there is a stigma of Rockies players, we're starting to see more and more how many great players have played in Colorado, whether it be the ones that the Rockies have developed and they are true to ourselves, Rockies legends, or if they're players that might have come and had major impacts, or just players that just interesting facts and tidbits. There's enough there with the Colorado Rockies that there is a lot of really, really great history. And I think it's time for the Rockies to start highlighting that, showing it off a little bit more, and starting to honor their own players a little bit more. I think that would be the right type of move, and something the Rockies, I think, are probably already considering as they continue to get older and older. And now we're seeing multiple Rockies greats on the ballot. For one, I know that there's been a few on the ballot before when we've seen it, and the Blake Street Bombers have had their run. It's not like there's Rockies players that haven't been on the ballot before, but now it's just, there's even more legacy to celebrate. There's even more Rockies baseball to look back on and reflect on. But folks, that's going to do it for your Locked On Rockies podcast for today. Thank you so much for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. Now that you made us your first listen of the day, why don't you go check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, where you can find your team each and every day. Every team. That's the whole point of that podcast. It's great. They talk about all the sports there on that. And if you want to stay up to date with all things Colorado sports, you can follow the Locked On Broncos, Locked On Avalanche, and Locked On Nuggets podcast. We are on Twitter at LO Rockies. I'm there as well at Paul Holden 33. Our episodes are posted on YouTube as well. You can be part of the live chat and help us grow by subscribing to Locked On Rockies on YouTube. Folks, until next time, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.